Tuesday, February 7th, 2023, Exeter Township School District Committee of a Whole meeting. Please note that prior to this meeting, we had an executive session to address personnel matters, and after this meeting, we'll have another executive session to address personnel matters. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Fike, can you please take roll call?
Dr. Ann Herring.
Present.
John Fiddler.
Here.
Dr. Andrea Battler.
Here.
Dr. David Hemberger.
Here.
Jason Mell.
Here.
Timothy Morgan.
Here.
Robert Quinter. Julia Schaefer.
Here.
Allison Wilson.
Here.
All present.
Thank you, Mr. Fike. In addition to the 9 board members in attendance this evening, we're also joined at the board table by our solicitor, Sharon Montaigne, and members of the school district administration, including Dr. Christy Haller, superintendent, Mrs. Dawn Harris, assistant superintendent, Mrs. Diane Skornavaki, director of human resources, and Mr. Brian Fike, who serves as our business administrator as well as our board secretary. The meeting minutes are attached. Does anybody have any changes or discussion they would like to make regarding meeting minutes for January 3rd, 2023 Committee of a Whole meeting and January 17th, 2023 board voting meeting? No? Okay. On the agenda, we have a presentation by Ben Bernhardt, our transportation director.
Good evening. As we all remember, back in 2018, unfortunately, one of our Exeter students was hit by a car passing a school bus illegally. At that time, we invested heavily into our sidearm cameras. However, our sidearm cameras have some deficiencies. One is they only face backwards. And it's also 5 years ago. So there's a lot new technology. Technology is ever changing. So this company out there is called Bus Patrol, where they will actually come and install modern day cameras with artificial intelligence on them to actually identify cars that come either way past the bus. So as well as they will also upgrade our video system inside the bus for us. And I have Matt from Bus Patrol. He's going to give you an overview of the program. It's something that I would recommend, and there's a lot of school districts in this local area doing it. Kutztown, Daniel Boone, BCIU, Reading, and Wilson just signed a contract in December. So it is a really good program.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Try to keep this as short, as sweet as possible. Please ask any questions, elaborate, deep dive.
Could I ask you to just move the mic up a little bit so our people at home can hear?
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool, perfect. If we have any questions, please let me know. Be happy to deep dive anything, but I do want to make sure we use your time correctly. Matt Anderson from Bus Patrol. Bus Patrol, we were founded back in 2017 with the sole idea about reducing the overall stop arm violations that occur on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. Our core mission is to make the journey to and from school safer for every child. And this does not matter what bus they ride, what area they live in, what zip code they live in. The goal is to protect all children on every bus on an everyday basis. Next slide. I'm sure everyone's seen these stats, but on average, every year, NASDIPS does a survey that surveys how many people actually do pass the school bus with the stop arm out. So they ask drivers to basically just make a tally mark every time they see one. And then as of the last survey that came out, it happens on average 0.73 times per bus per day. Equate that over the 500,000 buses in the country, comes out to roughly 95,000 potential violations every day, or 17 million that occur each year. So our goal is to drive down that number as quickly as we possibly can. Next slide. So we worked with Senator Brown and his team back in 2017, 2018 to help get a law established here in Pennsylvania. It is now Title 75. It was signed August 1st of 2020, which allows programs like ours and automated enforcement for stop arm cameras liable here in Pennsylvania. So when we're working with Senator Brown and his team, he wanted to see what it was like in his community. We all know the national numbers, but he says, what is it like in my community? So if you look on the left side, the traditional way, or how it's done today, and I was talking to Benjamin here, the way they do it is they have to get the bus driver to capture the year, the make, the model, the color, and if possible, identification of that driver as well as the license plate. What they do is they take that in-house, they send that to police. On average, those police investigations are 4 to 6 hours per investigation. And as you can see from the numbers, at 0.00017% of the time, those are actually upheld. So in all of 2018, the last time they kept these stats, there were 667 citations written on over 21,000 buses across the state. When we came into Allentown, we did a pilot on 2 buses for 3 months, and we captured 205 violations, or over 2 violations per bus per day. And that's what helped really drive that law that is now established, which is Title 75. Next slide. So since that date, we've grown very, very quickly here in Pennsylvania. We have over 35 live programs, over 100 police jurisdictions, including PSP, who are participating in the program. Over 2,700 buses have been currently installed and are currently live today. We have another 10 programs that are currently being installed. And then on average, we're averaging about 4 to 6 board meetings a month. So our goal is to be well over 50 live programs by the end of the school year. Next slide. So this is just some example footage of what the cameras can capture. So we use technology called AI versus what every other company uses, which is a technology called LiDAR. So forgive me if you're not a baseball fan, but I always like to use the analogy, if you throw a pitch, the LiDAR AI can both capture a pitch, and it'll tell you the speed, the pitch, the location of it. But if you took 2, 3, 5, 10 pitches, LiDAR is going to pick up 1, or it's going to get confused and not capture any. Whereas AI will capture all 10 and tell you exactly the speed, the pitch, and the location of it. So the technology does not get confused, and we have over a 99% success rate on capturing every vehicle that chooses to pass the bus up to 8 lanes across. Everything's 4K 1080p, and then we have AVA, which you're seeing now is the AI video, and then on the bottom right, you'll see our camera system that captures still pictures, no matter which way the car is traveling. Next slide. And then how does the system work? So as this, the bus is coming to a stop, and I'll show you a picture of this here in a minute. So when the yellows are activated, we start recording any and all cars. So once it comes to a full stop, the reds are activated, the stop paddles go out, we start capturing those vehicles who choose to pass the bus at that time. That way we can show a context of time between the yellows and the reds, or did those vehicles around the bus around that vehicle, and then once it is captured, we show you here in a second. AI tech. What across the street? Which ones were near the bumper of the bus when the reds went out? So that way we can get. And then system This is for you. Next slide. As well as you get all the monthly reporting. So the district will be able to see daily, weekly, monthly how many you give you investments. So if we see 15-20% of your citations are coming from a specific stop, maybe we reroute that stop. We get there sooner, we get there later to beat the traffic patterns to help us drive down all those citations. You always have this data at your fingertips. Next slide. As well as we do a ton of PSAs throughout the community. So prior to the program ever going live, through the full 5 years of the contract, we're constantly pushing out education material through newspapers and news articles. We're happy to attend board meetings like this or PTA meetings or whatever it is to help let the community know the program's there, why it's important. Keep an eye around the bus, as well as we do a ton of in-classroom education as well for the students. We have coloring books and music videos and all kinds of stuff to let them know, look both ways and crossing the street and different stuff. That's important when you're around the bus. Next slide. So just kind of sum it up is that we call it a program for a reason. So it's not a hardware, it's not a software, it's a program because again, we try to take as much as possible off your plate. From the installation, deinstallation, from the storing the data on Amazon Web Services. You guys own that data. We just store it on your behalf so you don't have to pay for those server fees. To the monthly reporting, unlimited training, all the media campaigns, all the call centers for disputes. We work with courts. We work with PDs. All that stuff falls on our plate. Next slide. And then finally, this is our most prideful stat, is 98% of people who get a citation don't get a second, which for us shows that education is important, whether that's education through a citation or education through the media campaign. Once the community knows the law is there, it's being upheld and why it's being upheld, the importance of the student safety, we do not see repeat offenders through the program. Next slide. And that's all I got for you. Any questions?
Matt, do you have any stats on appeals and how many motorists have appealed tickets based on this system and what the appeal rate is?
It's about 2%. And then of those 2%, less than half actually show up to court. So most of the time it's an extension just to buy time. But yeah, it's about 2 out of every 100.
Okay, thank you.
So to understand this correctly, there's no cost to the district. Your company keeps the fines, correct?
We split them 60-40. So we get 60% or $150 of the fine. The district gets 40% or 100% of the fine.
And that's how you're funding your company, is through the fines.
Correct. Yep. As well as a revenue source back to the district.
And if we decided to do this, is there a contract that comes with that states all that, I assume?
Absolutely. Yep. I sent that to.
It's an attachment.
Yeah.
So what happens when you guys are as good as you say you are and and nobody gets fined anymore?
Yeah, so any
How do you continue to fund that?
So any remaining costs, so we look at it as kind of a wholesome program. So we look at it as more of a macro, what are we doing in Pennsylvania versus each independent district. So we try to take some of those districts that may be having more violations and paying for some of the districts that are in more rural areas where they may never have a citation. But overall, because most of the time the technology is needed in the rural areas, though those 2-lane highways that people are going 67 miles, 70 miles an hour, so if a student gets in trouble in that situation, it doesn't turn out well. Whereas the city and more metropolitan districts will have more violations to help pay for the more rural districts. So us, with the way we look at it, it's more of the macro, are we financially stable as a whole?
And any upgrades or issues with the equipment you guys handle, correct?
100%, yes.
So essentially you own the equipment. The district does not own the equipment.
Correct.
And Brian, how much did we in the last 12 months get in violation revenue from the police department?
Very little. I think it was a couple $100, that's it.
And I guess my last question is for Sharon. You know, they have ability to see video footage from inside the bus. Are there any privacy legal things that we have to worry about with them having access as well as us?
With this company?
Uh-huh.
No, I didn't look through the contract language, but you can put language in there, much like myself, that I can view what is otherwise confidential information as an extension of the school district.
Good job. I think this is great, and I applaud you guys for figuring this out.
Thank
That's
you so
awesome.
much. Appreciate it.
So I just had kind of expanding on Mr. Morgan's questions around the costs. The technology fees, just kind of going over there. That's obviously something that the district would pay, which comes out of the fines, though, as stated in the contract, which would equate to $75,000 annually, or in a 5-year contract, $375,000. Based on the language, at least I could see in the contract, was that there is no obligation of the district, if we do not meet anywhere near that revenue in terms of violations, that we are responsible for paying that money at the end of the contract.
Yeah, correct. So if we never write a citation and that $300,000+ is sitting there at the end of the agreement, we write that total off. So there's never a cost to the district, and that's actually written into the agreement. It's the last page,
Right.
note 4 in the agreement. It states that any remaining technology fees left in the program, Bus Patrol is financially responsible for.
Okay. I'm trying to be an optimist in saying that with the amount of education that comes with the program, you would think eventually it would taper off. And I guess I'm having trouble understanding how Bus Patrol stays solvent with that model. Is there anything that would is there anything in the works that's changing with this? Is this like a trial run, this type of pricing model, before it switches to something else? Would you know anything about that?
Yeah, unless there's something I don't know about. No.
Okay,
this is the way
all right.
it's been.
Okay.
We've been operating this way since. So our first program went live in Maryland with Prince George's in
Yeah.
2016. Prince George's in Montgomery County. It's 1,100 buses and what are they, 1,200 buses, something like that.
Okay.
Those were our first 2 programs, and that was our original business model. We've been luckily we've had the same model through the last 5-6 years.
Is Bus Patrol is the company making additional revenue off of data sharing? Anything else that's being used, that's being collected, routes, any of that information?
Absolutely not. No,
Okay.
yeah, we don't store any of that data. We don't want any of that data. That's just
Okay.
not something that we're interested in.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And then I shared, I believe, all the privacy documents as well. So if not, I can reshare those to kind of give you those guarantees on the back end if you'd like.
Citing the fact that you've been in this for so long, I'm sure you have statistics. What is your normal reduction? In other words, for 6 months, everybody's probably getting used to it and getting scared. And then after that, I would hope that my fellow Exeter residents are smart enough to, hey, they really are enforcing this. What is the reduction that you've normally experienced?
It on average, again, it's just average, but it's usually about 30% year over year for the first 2 years, and then 20 to 25%. Every program we've had so far is started around that 0.75 to 1 violation per bus per day, and then it ends at about 0.2, 0.15. So for us as a company to stay solvent, we need 0.05 basically to break even, or 0.1 to break even. So we've yet to have a program dip below that, no matter what, because we always have new people coming to the area, new people getting driver's licenses, and that's just something that we have not seen. That goes from everywhere from we have a couple of districts that have 6 buses in a town of 700, and they're still averaging 0.25, to the Montgomery counties and those huge ones where they're averaging about 0.3, 0.35. Absolutely. Yeah, and you'll have all those stats. Absolutely. Unfortunately. Well, fortunately for us, but unfortunately for the community. But that's our whole goal, is to drive those down. So if we ever need to come back in and do a hard media push, or a lot of the times we actually look at those hotspots that we provide, and we'll partner with PD and say, look, the 2 hotspots currently for the last 2 weeks are X and Y, and they'll go put a patrol car out there and try to make a presence known in those areas to help drive down those numbers. But they actually have that data. Instead of guessing which spots to park their car in, they have that data to see exactly where they need to park and help us out. They have. We spoke of Exeter PD.
We haven't gone in detail, and I have not talked to Central Berks at all yet. But that would be something that Bus Patrol would handle for us.
Yeah, so all of our program managers, the gentleman in this area is named David Gold. So he worked for Phoenixville PD for about 26 years, has since retired, and then he is the, if you will, cop to cop, right? He has that respect. He knows the law. He helps stand up another program. So he's the one who works directly with the courts and the PDs to help get them on board, do all the retrainings, make sure they know exactly what's going on, and then as well as any issues that happen with courts, he'll go sit in the courts. We'll do trainings with the PDs, whatever it is. We speak to judges. Every Friday, I have a call with a new judge throughout the state to get them up and going on the program. We have a wonderful relationship with PSP, who is in full support of our program as well. So it's just getting that known. And again, we handle all those conversations, the trainings, all that stuff's handled by us.
One additional question I did have, there was something I noticed in the contract. It said the district was responsible for paying for any equipment damage caused by staff, the drivers, or by vandalism if the buses aren't secured. I don't recall seeing anything in the contract that gave more definition about that. Like what is considered having a bus secured in order to prevent vandalism? Are we talking a full gated center for the buses? Do we need to have them gated in, or would it suffice just to have them in an off-site location?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've never enforced that. And I don't see us ever enforcing in that as far as having the district pay for any cameras. The only time it ever would if it's obviously malicious. We recently had a district where a student, you can see him 2 days in a row, stared at the camera, and then on the third day went to Home Depot or wherever he went, got a special tool, and took that camera completely out of the bus on his drive to school. So, so that's just something. We sent a tech out there, we got it fixed and had it upright. And in my opinion, we should hire that kid because that's pretty amazing. So I don't know whatever happened with that, but yeah, I don't see us ever enforcing that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Do you have any competitors?
We do one, Vero Mobility. A lot of differences between the two of us. They really rely on the 10 to 15% of the fleet. So they do not do full fleet deployment, as well as they don't have an internal system like us or partners like we do for additional technology. So we do have somebody who does something similar to us, but no direct competitors. And then you have your Safe Visions or Seance and other companies that have stop arm cameras, but those are all for purchase, not a paid for program through the violations.
I have a question for Brian and or Ben. Have we spoken to or will we talk to other clients of Bus Patrol to get their take? I mean, we got a very lovely presentation here, but it's always good to get comments from people who are actually using the product and the service.
Okay. I've spoken to John Coakley over at the BCIU. Now, they're relatively new. I don't even know if they're online yet. Is Reading online? Yeah, they're not online yet. About it, BCIU's going with it. I have not talked to Christ at Daniel Boone yet or Kutztown. No.
Do you plan to?
Yeah, that we can always get references.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Just a question for administration or Mr. Fike. What is your opinion on the system? Do we feel like this is something that is worth the venture and going through and getting this installation?
I think that anything that adds safety for the children, it's worth it.
Sure, absolutely. Is there any consideration we need to make in terms of logistics and downtime in order to get everything installed, and just in terms of how long that installation takes?
I'd refer that to Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do work nights and weekends, or in the summer. So depending on what your time frame is for install, if it's sooner rather than later, we'll come and work from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. So that way we're not affecting your day-to-day, and then work all day Saturday, Sunday. If you have any breaks, spring break coming up, we can work over spring break. We'll work 100% around your calendar.
Okay.
One other thing I wanted to add, we did vet this through our safety and security coordinator. He was for it. I know Christy probably has some comments too.
I just like to restate about the safety piece. I was the principal at Lorraine when that student was hit by the car, and she was a very lucky girl. She absolutely could have been killed. Oftentimes, we, as a former building principal, we've had bus drivers be very upset because they are trying to drive, keep their eyes on the road, monitor student safety. And when they stop, they expect people to be courteous on the road, follow the law, and people are just flying by them. And it's not just on the highway; it's on in developments. They're just passing by, and it jeopardizes our students. So, as Brian said, anything that can help our students be safer and support our bus drivers in our work, I think we're all 100% behind, because safety is paramount, and parents trust that, kids are coming to school and getting home, and they're safe.
So I just wanted to say, Mr. Anderson, that I thought it was a fantastic presentation. I really like the idea. I'm just not going to lie, it sounds too good to be true, and when something sounds too good to be true, it almost is. So have you had anybody at all have any issues with your system, or have any issues, any complaints? Have you guys had that you've had to, come back and say, oh, we're going to tweak this, we have to do something here? Anything like that has ever happened?
You're not going to believe me, but no, not so far. Because of the service we provide, so even down to the technicians. So all the technicians work for us. So it's not a third-party group we're bringing in. We hire them, we train them. They go through a 7-day academy at Bus Patrol Academy. We own 19 different buses from different year makes and models, and they have to install or repair something on every bus type before they ever get to your fleet. And that for us is that initial hello to the program, and that's critical for us to get that piece right, and that's the hardest part, is that installation, and we have that down pat. So that's usually the hardest part, and then from there it's just program management, which for us in the camera system we have very, very low failures. If there ever is a failure, you guys know about it as well as we know about it within about 3 hours, and we'll dispatch a tech to fix it, recalibrate it, whatever that is, to get that system operational. Because according to our business model, if it's not operational, we can't provide revenue to pay for it. So it's critical for us to always have this operational. And same thing with the internal cameras for the team.
So no matter what type of bus we have, you can install it. I mean, I'm saying 10 years old, brand new, the electric, everything like that.
We ran into a 1998 the other day.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think we installed it. I don't think we could, because the J bus port started in 2002. So it's really anything 2002 and newer we can install.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
No one else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for the information. We appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Absolutely.
And Ben, thank you for everything you do. Okay. Are we moving that over to the voting meeting? That's okay. All right, thank you. Okay, we will not be amending the agenda tonight, so we'll go to Education Committee, Dr. Battler.
Thank you, Dr. Hearing. So first on the agenda is conference requests. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following list of staff conferences. There are, I think, like 8 or 9 on here. If anybody has any discussion for that.
I'm going to be abstaining because my spouse is listed on one of the conferences.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mel. Anybody else? No? Okay, then we will move that to the voting meeting. Next, we have field trips within the 60-mile radius. It looks like the elementary building's gifted class will be traveling to BCIU for the STEM Design Challenge competition, which sounds exciting. Lorraine Elementary K-4 ESL going to Antietam Creek at the community park for a trout release. The senior high school German exchange will be going to Philadelphia, kindergarten to Elmwood Zoo, and etc. I'm sorry, I'm not going to read all of these. I apologize for starting. But it sounds very exciting. The one question that I had for the administration was, What's community-based instruction for the junior high?
We have discussed this previously. Community-based instruction is what our students with special needs and certain populations of our special needs groups do as part of their IEP instruction, so that they have the opportunity to generalize their skills from the classroom to more contextual settings.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Ms. Harris. Any other discussion on field trips within the 60-mile radius? No? Okay, moving on. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following field trips beyond the 60-mile radius. Items 1 through 6. Do we have any discussion on that? Nope. Okay, moving on. We have a waiver agreement and release. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves a settlement agreement and release between the parents individually on their own behalf and on behalf of their minor child, student ID, as proposed, and further authorizes the board president and board secretary to execute the settlement agreement and release on behalf of the district. Any discussion?
Dr. Battler, on this item as well as items E and F, the agreements do have incorrect zip codes mentioned in the first paragraph, so I'm not sure if it's something that is carried over from a template, but I wanted to make administration aware of that.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll be updating that and moving that to the voting agenda. E, again, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approves a settlement agreement and release between the parents individually on their own behalf and on behalf of their minor child, student ID number, as proposed, and further authorizes the board president and board secretary to execute the settlement agreement and release on behalf of the district. If we don't have any discussion about that, that'll be also moved to the voting meeting after it's updated. And then letter F, recommended that the Board of School Directors approves a settlement agreement and release between the parents individually on their own behalf and on behalf of their minor child, student ID number, as proposed, and further authorizes the board president and board secretary to execute the settlement agreement and release on behalf of the district. Okay. Moving on to letter G. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors authorize the superintendent to utilize flexible instruction days at her discretion in accordance with parameters set by the Pennsylvania Department of Education for the 2023-2024 school year. And I will open this up to to board comment. Yeah, not public yet. Sorry.
So I think this is absolutely a necessity. How we use flexible instruction days, I think that we talked about this at the last board meeting. I think there's a lot of discussion about how that has to happen and how Dr. Haller and her team intend to build out that program. However, I don't know that we should have the authority at this point to let her know when she can and when she can't, especially because I think a lot of times these things arise as an emergency situation. And as we saw a couple weeks ago, things change very fluidly and very quickly, especially with the weather. So I fully support this, and I think that she should be able to make those decisions at her discretion.
I agree. That's all I have.
I agree as well. I just kind of hope for next year we have a better program in place for the FID days. And it should be thoughtful, not a 15-minute kind of lesson for the kids. It's not enough.
I'd just like to reiterate my comments from our last meeting as well. I have a real problem considering these flexible instructional days adequate the way they're currently constructed to replace regular school days. I gave some thought, since the last meeting. I can see if we had synchronous instruction as we had during COVID, where kids were able to participate and interact with their teachers on that moment-to-moment basis, throughout that flexible instructional day. But the way this is designed and what I see is pretty significant inequity between those who have the ability to supervise their kids at home and see that they complete the tasks that are required, and those that don't have that capability. Really, it kind of makes it a very unfair playing field for students in our community. I also think that these are the days that if we were to use them, we should be thinking about what our staff is doing during these days as well. I'm not sure if that's really been thought through. We pay a significant amount of money, and assuming that all staff members are going to be paid a full wage for these flexible instructional days. My sense is, or my understanding is, that teachers don't have any responsibility other than maybe just manning a phone for a brief period of time or being online for a brief period of time to be able to respond to student questions, but not to provide instruction. So I think we're doing a disservice to students. I think we're doing a disservice to our community by not being good stewards of the tax dollars that are being allocated for public education. And I really, I'm speaking specifically to the use of these days for snow days as replacements for snow days. As I mentioned before, I personally would be somewhat more flexible if we only used a few of them or allocated a couple and sort of designated the superintendent would be able to kind of use her discretion up to 2 snow days for flexible instructional days. But beyond that, 5 days, in my way of thinking, is, I think, a gross disservice to our students and to our community. So, again, that's pretty much a reiteration of what I said last time we spoke.
And I agree with what Dr. Hemberger just said, 100%.
I will echo that. I also agree with Dr. Hemberger, especially for the K through 8 class. I understand that, 9 through 12, they can do their own work. They can review things they are working on, say, projects, subjects, things like that. But even up to 8th grade, they really need to be able to see their teachers more than just, say, a 2-hour check-in in the morning or 2-hour check-in in the afternoon. I do agree that in cases of, say, ice storms, things like that, that a FID day is something that we should or could use. But I would like to see, just based on this, I don't see how this is replicating a school day, I guess. I don't want to vote on it and say, yes, go ahead and use at your discretion, but at the same time, I don't know what's going to be going into these days. And so far, I haven't seen exactly what's going to be going into a FID day, what we have, worked out, so to speak, for the children that really need this. So speaking as a parent, I am, not convinced that we should be using, as Dr. Hemberger said, say more than 2 of these a year.
I just want to be clear that from my perspective anyway, there's nothing in this proposed for the vote that says that Dr. Haller has to use these in a row, that she has to use all of them. It just says that she uses them at her discretion. I think we've all explained what, we feel is important to us as a board. However, we hired Dr. Haller recently. She's given us a very good long-term and short-term goals as to what she thinks is best. She knows education better than I will ever know education, and I would hope that her discretion equals her making sure she puts the education of our students first. So I continue to support this.
If I could just offer just a little narrative about what happened that Wednesday. So when there's a call for bad weather, superintendents across the county start talking about it the night before. There's a group of us, then we start emailing back and forth starting at 4 in the morning, which is awesome. Because we are all trying to figure out, what is the best and safest thing to do. There are many districts in the county who have moved forward with using FID days first. That is, certainly a sense in that board and that community of what's appropriate. There's other school districts such as Exeter that have not taken that approach. And then there's some school districts that they're going to use all their FID days first. So when it came to making a decision about what to do on Wednesday, I was really torn because I looked at multiple different models, and at the end of the day, it really looked like the storm was going to be insignificant. And not just Exeter, but several other districts decided to go in. When you make a call like that, and then you start with snow, if you've ever been a classroom teacher, as the junior high is here, because they know exactly where I'm going with this. It doesn't matter. Like, I've taught middle school, I've taught elementary school, and I've been an administrator in multiple grades. As soon as that loudspeaker goes off, whether it's the building principal or the secretary, and says, "Teachers, please check your email," all the kids know. They all know. They all know what's happening. They all know it's an early dismissal day. That wreaks havoc for teachers. It wreaks havoc for food services. It wreaks havoc for the transportation department, because our bus drivers are not full-time employees. So our transportation department has to scramble, get all those bus drivers in, and now we're trying to beat the clock of when we think the weather has started, which is exactly what happened on Wednesday. That storm came upon us. It was supposed to start at noon. We literally sent off our secondary students at 11, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack because the snowflakes started coming down. And within an hour, we had 2 inches of snow on the ground. And I felt at that point that it was, and we were in it. We were in it, and we couldn't hold the kids back, because at that point, if we would have waited till the end of the day, and I know some school districts took a gamble with that, we might not have been able to get kids home, like happened a number of years ago, where we had kids stuck on the road till 8 o'clock at night. And you're, like I said, you're in it. And so you make that decision, and then you have to work through the decision that has been made. I don't feel like I made a good decision that Wednesday. I don't believe that it was the safest decision for our students, who I'm in charge of. I don't believe it was the safest decision ultimately for the bus drivers, who bear the burden of getting those kids home. And then I don't believe that I made the safest decision for staff, who then ultimately had to go home. And I understand what everyone's saying about what we pay people to work. But when you call a half day like that, we do send people home, because we should send home people, and we're still paying them for a full day. And I can assure you that absolutely no learning took place that day. It didn't, Dr. Hamburger. And I
don't want to confuse the issue, but I mean, there is a difference. I mean, the system that used to be in place for who knows how many years was that days like you described could have very, very easily been avoided just by calling a snow day. A snow day is a day that you make up, and we have a schedule for making up those snow days. I have no problem with that. Mm-hmm. If you had called a snow day, I would have understood that. But calling that a flexible instructional day is therefore not a makeup day. And the quality of instruction on those days and the level of activity among our staff on those days is what I question. Mm-hmm. So, I understand that's a tough call. Really, that's very difficult. The superintendent's day is obviously the snow day.
I think that for next year, it's more important to have those days in play, because as a board, the calendar is approved with 3 snow makeup days. That's it. We only have 3 snow makeup days. And so we are legally responsible to provide kids with 180 days. Our seniors graduate before. So if we have to make up those days after the designated last day of school, our seniors are getting wind up getting way less than 180 days. So that's another consideration for why school districts do use those FID days, because it is tied to funding.
Yeah. And the funding only applies to the senior class on a per diem basis. So, I would say that most districts used to deal with that in the past. The idea is to add those snow days onto the end of the school year. And you don't say you just have three snow days in the year. You have 3 snow days, and then you make up the additional snow days at the end of the year. The other ones are built into the calendar. Mm-hmm. That's the way it's always worked. Now we're talking about an idea that we use FID days so that we don't have any additions onto the end of the school year, so we can convenience all the people that necessarily have to take off on their vacations immediately. It's unfortunate that the calendar's built that way, but we've dug this our own hole, essentially. And it could have been designed many other ways, but we've only allowed ourselves 3 days, which is very atypical from the way it's always been and the way calendars have been constructed, for school districts. So I'm thinking we're creating our own problem here in many respects by kind of only allocating a certain, 3 snow days for next year. Unprecedented for my mind, because in the past we've always had many more snow days available, to be sure we can make up those instructional days.
I know that when I voted on the calendar, I was under the assumption that, and as you said, with the 3 snow days, and my heart totally went out to you that day. I'm just saying, I thought that you did, I stood behind you 100% because I don't know what I would have done, and so I'm not judging you at all based on, this has nothing to do with that. But I was under, what I was concerned about was when I voted for that calendar and the 3 snow days, that's when we were also talking about FID days. I was under the assumption that we were going to vote in, say, 2 or 3 FID days. Like there was going to be a maximum, say, of FID days. So that when we did have a situation of it's not snowing, kids are going out to play, it's like freezing rain and we can't get them into school, that they were going to be used as a flexible instruction day. But my biggest concern, and it's not even how long the teachers teach. I'll be honest, I mean, I understand the point of view of, we're paying a teacher the full day and all of that. That's not my concern. My concern is that the child is not learning that day. And I know that, as you said, if you go in and you say the kid, we're getting out at noon, nothing happens. I get that. Trust me. I have kids. But I also, if we're going to go with FID days, I would like to know that we have a process or we have something that's designed to, actually teach that day. And it's not just all review. Because as you said, like sometimes you can get, say, 3 bad days in a row. You can't just review little things for 3 straight days. When those kids come back, it's, that's a huge catch up, not just for the kids, but for the teachers too. I mean, because they have to teach to a certain day. So that's my concern.
And it's up to the board's discretion how many days you perhaps want to allocate. If you would choose to allow me to use FID days, how many days you're going to allocate for me to use. It's up to the board's discretion to say, Christy, we're going to allocate the days, but you need to use the snow days first, whereas some districts have decided to use all the FID days. So that way, if we get to a situation where next year happens to be a horrific winter and we use all the snow days first, and then we're, it's March and we have a blizzard, then we do have those flexible instruction days. And from a perspective coming from a classroom, from a tested subject area, because when I taught 6th grade, we gave PSSAs. When you lose those days before PSSAs, that's tough. And that's a perfect time to have those FID days where you can give students review material, because there is review material available, whereas putting them on the back end of a school year when the school year is essentially over, and we're also collecting materials because we have a responsibility to the school district to collect textbooks, and we're going into another week and we don't know if kids are going to come back in, because that happens. That's what we deal with. That's what we work with, because people do have trips, whether we put a disclaimer on a calendar or not, saying like, guess what, these days could be made up. I would rather have that opportunity where we do give kids time to review, because once you tack them into June, I don't know that is as helpful as perhaps getting a shot at having them do work during the school year. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is a tool that PDE has given us to manage what has become somewhat a very difficult weather in Pennsylvania. And this year it might be nothing, and that would be great. And perhaps we won't have any more snow this year. I know that's what I'm, crossing my fingers for. But in other times when we had a really horrific winter about 9 years ago, I'm not sure if anybody even recalls this. I know the teachers will definitely recall this. It got so bad in Pennsylvania school districts that we did not have students make up that time. Students did not make up that time. The teachers did come in and make up the time under Act 80, but the time was lost for students, and it was about 9 days. Or I'm sorry, I exaggerate. It was a week. It was a week where teachers participated in PD, but we ended the school year for students. So that happened. That has happened. So again, I'm not saying that a flexible instruction day is the be all to end all. I understand all the implications for it, but it would be helpful to have additional Ds, even if I have to use them after I use the snow days. And if that's the parameters that are set, that's the parameters we will abide by.
Right. Dr. Haller, according to the law that's in place, your school district's only permitted a total of 5 days per school year.
That's correct.
That's correct. I mean, we're not talking about the superintendent being able to call out an entire month of fit days. To me, 5 days does not seem like a lot of days. And I mean, I feel like we need to allow the superintendent to do her job, and this is part of her toolkit, that she is able to then use that if she feels that she needs to, for given whatever the circumstances. It may not even be weather, perhaps, right? If there was an issue at one of the buildings that you had to close down and those students had to go home, that could be used as a fit day.
Yeah, so if we came in one day and one of the buildings had no heat, but the rest of the kids, all the other buildings were fine, we could call, this just changed in the law, like this just changed last month. I could call a fit day for that building, and it counts towards the 5. So now you're down to 4, but it only impacts that one building. That is actually could potentially be very, very helpful. Again, I am not stating that I think fit days are great, because I don't believe that they are. But as I said, that it is something to help superintendents navigate how to manage the fact that we do have to comply with having kids in school for a certain amount of time, and also make very difficult decisions regarding the weather. And I own that. We have built-in snow days. We have 4. I should have called the day, and I chose to go the other way.
What I understand what Mrs. Wilson and David are saying, but we can just say these days aren't worth a darn. Well, I happen to know that we have some teachers who are going to have in their back pocket that's continually updated, okay, this is what they're going to do. We'll have some students, like my grandson, who sits there all day with a computer and is learning things as a first grader. And he can operate that computer better than I do. Well, and I'm pretty damn good. But we can't generalize and say that these are worthless days. And they are tools that the state has given us. Some people, some students, and some teachers will make better use of them than others. There's some that won't be worth a darn. But such is life. I've had people work for me that never put in a full day's work in their life until I fired them. But, it's a tool, and I'm going to support it. And I understand what you both are saying. I understand it's not as good as standing in front of a teacher, but I've had teachers at Exeter that standing in front of that teacher was a waste of my time all year. So of course, that was a long time ago. None of the current teachers are that way. It's a tool. And I have confidence that Dr. Haller is going to use it wisely, and therefore I will support the thing.
Okay, if nobody has any other discussion, we will send that to the voting meeting. And we will move on to letter H. It is reported that senior high student number has been given permission to attend Exeter Township Senior High School as a non-resident senior for the remainder of the 22-23 school year in accordance in policy number 202, eligibility of non-resident students. Any discussion on this? I just had one question. This is this a situation where the parents moved out of the district and the child is finishing up their senior high or their senior year here?
Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay.
part of our policy 202.
Yep.
So if a family, if they start to attend here during the senior year and then the family moves, the student is allowed to stay. Families have to provide their own transportation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Harris?
I have another question. Is there tuition involved, or are they
No.
sort of grandfathered?
Oh, sorry.
No, there's no tuition involved because it's part of our policy that we grant this exception.
Yes. Okay, then I am done with my section.
Thank you, Dr. Bentler. Finance, Facilities, and Audit Committee, Mr. Mel.
Yes, Dr. Hearing, starting with item A, Mr. Fike will be discussing the 2022-23 year-to-date budget update.
Is Joe in there, or? I'd ask him to pull up the handout. Okay, I'm also passing around the handout. I thought it'd be important to go over where we stand year to date. I know the board every single month gets this in their treasurer's report. I don't know if the public looks at it or not looks at it. But I just wanted to review some highlights because people are worried where we stand this year. I think we're going to be fine. We're up on some things in expenditures, but we're also up on some things in revenue. If we want to start with the revenue section, current real estate taxes will probably come in right where we thought. Transfer taxes are still a little bit higher than budgeted. Surprising, I thought the real estate transfer tax would go down this year, but we still see properties transferring, people buying them, even though their interest rates are up. The one important thing to note is with inflation, we're all suddenly getting interest on our accounts. I budgeted $50,000 because that's what we had last year, and we're already over $500,000, about $58,000 a month we're receiving in interest. So that's the positive things, which should cover when we get to expenditures or overages that I expect in expenditures. Everything else seems to be coming in. Revenue, I still have to bill most of the building use because we've been short-staffed in the office, but our buildings are actually being used more than they were last year. Athletics, I was talking to Ben today. Last year at this time we had 280 sports trips. Right now we're at 338 sports trips for the same time period. Building use, this past weekend we had 140 hours of overtime because almost every building had something going on in it. Some of those were own sponsored, but a lot of them were community sponsored, which then will be paying the custodial fees, and that's why I also put on the agenda later. I'd like to set a straight custodial fee so we don't have to wait till the time cards come back and one person gets charged higher because that person makes more than the other custodian.
Mr. Fike,
Sure.
Sorry, just because you passed it already, the bearing checkage?
Pardon?
The bearing checkage, it's halfway down the functions?
Interest-bearing checking.
Okay. That's what you were speaking of.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Interest on investments and interest-bearing checking. All of our accounts have some type of interest. Even the checking have interest on the checking accounts. Like I said, we budgeted $50,000 up through January up to $523,000. When you look at the far right corner, it gives you a percentage fiscal year to date. Now we are 7 months in. When I get to expenditures, I look at 50%, even though we're 7 months in instead of, because in expenditures, we're about a month behind on paying the bills or getting them posted. Usually whatever we incurred this month, we will pay the following month or get the invoice next month. Salaries are right on there. So when you go down through and you look at the percentages, you start looking at certain things like why we over in this area. Mercantile tax, we received some things from previous year's collection, so that's up. Interest on investments or interest earnings was way up compared to what we had the previous year. And when we did this budget last year, we didn't see inflation the way it hit this year. We're finally seeing interest rates of 4.5 to 4.6 on short terms, because we have basically what you call sweep accounts, where we use the Pennsylvania Liquid Investment Trust, and they're constantly buying CDs and cashing in CDs, so we only take out the cash out of those accounts when we need to pay bills. So we're getting the maximum interest. Like today's rates on the 18-day rate, we're getting 4.65%. So it adds up a lot from last year. In the beginning of last year, we were at 0.15%.
Right. So you're saying, I'm sorry, forgive me, and you're going so fast that I
I'm
do
sorry.
apologize, sir. But you're saying back on that interest, on the interest-bearing checks and all of that, that you budgeted $50,000 that we would receive, and we've received so far $500,000?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly.
I'm saying that because last year
It was
were receiving
0.05, and it's now
0.15,
almost up to 5.
and
Right.
we're at 4.65 right now.
Okay. Just double checking as I was looking at these
And
things.
when you get your treasurer's report, you'll see there's maybe $20 or $30 million in the bank at any one time, because in the beginning of the year, from July through September, with all the taxes coming in, we might be at 60 or 70 million. But by June, we're down to less than 10 million of cash in the bank.
Gotcha.
On an $80 million budget, you really need that to cover expenses, to the following months.
Sorry, Mr. Fike. So just one question on the advertising income. It looks like we budgeted $48,000. We're about close to 10% so far this year. Do we have any idea what spring advertising looks like yet in terms of the potential income for that?
I think we're going to be around 30 or so thousand
Total. By the end. Okay.
Right. We're also talking. I think I saw Jen Brayton here, but we're also talking sponsorship opportunities. We actually have some people calling us up and asking what they can sponsor this coming year, because they're working on their bank budgets and things, so
Sure.
they need to budget it. They can't just go purchase right out because it wasn't in their budget.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Good to hear. Yeah, just double checking on that. See if we're getting any closer.
So the federal funds usually are a lag. That's why they're down on low percentages, but they start to come in the first quarter and the second quarter of this year. And the federal programs actually run from October 1st through September 30th. So that's why there's a lag on those programs. ARP funding, I've only pulled down a certain amount, but as it goes on and they qualify, we'll pull that into there also. I think I can ask Dawn, I think we finally got approval on the ARP extra or not?
Yeah, that one was approved a little bit ago. We started billing to that account.
Correct.
It's the other one, the newest one that we're still waiting for the award for.
Right.
Yeah.
Any questions on revenues?
Yeah,
I mean, we can go into a lot more detail. I can pull things up. I just wanted to go over.
No, just quick
Sure.
question. So, forgive me, the medical and dental services, what does that include?
Basically, I can let Dawn talk that. Medical access, we provide services that are reimbursable from
the medical
state
assistance,
or through the system. Yeah,
like through Access.
correct.
So we budgeted 74,000. Or wait, did I have? Yeah, okay. So I'm sorry, 74,000, but medical assistance down below is
I'm sorry.
290.
Medical and dental services. That's
Yes.
actually the employees' share. their deductible that they pay towards their premiums.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I apologize.
Since we have the full expense on the
Right.
benefit, we have to put that in.
Understood.
Yeah.
I thought that was student related, and I got really confused.
And that's usually a biannual adjustment from a liability account from what their
Okay.
gets posted in there.
Do we expect that to decrease with the thing down the street, or increase with the?
No, that's
Totally different.
whatever the percentage we pay towards our medical insurance.
Oh, understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Any other questions on revenues? Okay. So if we want to go to expenditures, I'll try to go through this. So like I said, we have 7 months into the year, but we actually have 6 months of expenditures. So what we're looking at right now is, if we're 50% or less, we're in good shape in those areas. The special ed is actually life skills all the way down through early intervention. We break it down into subcategories. Right now it looks like they're going to come in within budget. Vocational ed, pardon? Okay.
Yes, we will.
Vocational ed is up front, fronted up, I should say. We fund them a month ahead of time. So we know that will be within budget because we pay on the budgeted number. If we go down to supervision of services, pretty much we will come in around budget. I think might be a little bit over in counseling because of the contracts we have out there, but that will be made up from under budget in some of the other areas. Areas that I'm seeing us going to be under, legal and accounting services. Looks like we will be under that. Knock on wood. What do they say? Office of Principal Services, we've had some turnover, so you end up usually paying out some vacation and things. So we'll be close, but we'll be slightly over in that area. But like I said, almost everything that we will be over will be made up for the additional revenue from the interest earnings, which we didn't budget for. Areas I'm worried about is operation and maintenance of plants and buildings. We're paying triple what we paid last year for toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning supplies. I know Steve is constantly trying to find a better deal, but things just got way out of hand, and most of it's on shipping, besides the actual cost. Ground care, we're trying to make up or cut back on things like this spring. We're not going to mulch the flower beds. Probably in mowing season this year, we'll keep mowing the fields twice a week to keep the height they need. But the side areas, like little hillsides and stuff, I'm only going to do once a week. I don't plan on mowing the property across from Wrighton, except maybe once a month just to keep under the weed ordinance. So I'm going to try to cut back on some of the ground maintenance this summer.
I do actually have a question on that with the landscaping, because we as we see the payment requests that come through, and definitely see some high amounts towards landscaping. When was the last time we actually looked at options for landscapers in terms of?
2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago?
The problem is, this past year, they basically doubled the price.
Yeah,
and
that's
we
probably
should have gone out again.
Yeah.
But my plan is this year is if we're going to add any mulch, we're going to do it ourselves.
Okay.
Have it delivered, but I don't plan to do every single building. For years we didn't do anything, so it's you make up for what you didn't do.
Yeah.
But I think our buildings look really great this past year and a half or two. Our fields, I think we did a 3-year contract for bringing the play fields to fertilization. When I first came here, the thing I heard was, we got all these brown circles and brown spots in the fields because they stopped fertilizing for like 4 years. So if fertilizer 3, you can skip a year, but you can't skip for 4.
What does, I'm so sorry, Mr. Fike, what does SVSN stand for? It's under student transportation and under staff services.
It's on the second page in the middle.
I see that,
sorry.
yeah. I'm trying to see. I'm gonna have to look that up. SV.
I mean, is that just busing?
It
Sounds like
supervision, student transportation services. Yeah, that looks like the. That would be the management portion, and then we have our assistant and mechanics, and then operations services would be the bus drivers.
Okay,
So supervision, SV for supervision.
So the
Student.
so it's I only asked because it's 129%, and I didn't know what it stood for. So can you explain why it's 129% halfway through the year, but it's I don't know what SVSN is.
I'm gonna have to check on the salary, but that would actually be the director and assistant director. But I think what they ended up doing was putting the assistant director under directors, which is SVN. So that's probably going to be transferred back down to the second line underneath there, which would be the supervision portion instead of the director portion, because the director doesn't make that.
So I'm sorry. So it would be. So it's kind of like combine the 129
Yeah,
and
I
the
think
36.
what happened is when the other supervisor retired, all of her retirement benefits went into that line. And it should have
Okay.
actually gone into that lower line.
Okay. So 129 and 36 is 100 and.
Well, if you take
60
109
divided by-
167, yeah.
So 160 divided by 2 is 80. So we're still above, correct? Forgive me. I'm looking at the
100,
year to date total. So I'm just adding those two percentages.
141.60, so 200,000 out of 267,000. You're not that much above because one of those that portion of that was the person retiring. That person knows is not going to be there every month. Expenses are already spent on that, so you're not going to have that through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Fike, just one question too. I was looking at security services. That's only down around 21% year to date. Is that due to the drop in needing security personnel at board meetings?
That's also because we didn't have a safety and security coordinator the full year.
Okay.
We dropped the personnel here.
Yeah.
And we still haven't bought some of the replacement cameras because it's not just personnel, it's all security
Also
services.
equipment in there. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I think that was on purpose because they're trying to standardize all of our camera systems and the security systems.
Where are your utilities located on here?
They're under operation and maintenance of building services.
Operation of building services?
Correct. So you have both salaries, contracted services, and you're going to see in one of the items, maintenance agreements, all those things are all under there too.
So this
And
would
your
include our
utilities.
electrical bill.
Electric bill, gas bills.
So this doesn't seem as high as we originally predicted that it was going to be with the increase we were going to see in.
The increase doesn't start to June of this year.
Understood. Thank you.
Right. The contract we were under at 3.2 cents on electric expired in May of 2023.
Yeah. And then it'll be going to 7.2.
7.2 for the next 18 months.
Yeah.
Yep. But gas has gone up. I mean, Steve can probably tell you, it seems like everything in the world has been going up. Some of the other things we're going to be doing is we're going to drop the cleaning of the mats and, try to pull a lot of those things out because, they were nice to have, but I'd rather have toilet paper than have clean mats.
Where's the gas under here with the vehicle? Is that the vehicle
Well,
operation
the
services?
students' transportation vehicle operation services would have gasoline for the vehicles, diesel in there.
So it's only at 42%?
Yeah. And one of the
Even with
reasons
the
that one of the reasons that 42% is we are short on people.
Okay.
Um,
So it's less to do with the gas than the personnel.
Yeah, we also have, I think, right now 4 vehicles that are sitting in a garage waiting for parts to come in.
So this doesn't include the ones that we have to get from the other company. I'm sorry. You know how we have to get buses from the other company. We were discussing that at the last meeting. How we
That just started this past month.
Oh, so that's not even.
And that's only one bus we were able to get for one run.
Okay, so that's not included in this, or
No,
it is?
no, because that just started after the board vote.
Oh, I
last
see.
month.
January. Forgive me. I
Yep,
apologize. Thank you.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I had a call athletics to ask them to move an event on Friday because we didn't have any drivers until after all of our kids are dropped off. You know? And that's including with the fact that we do have another company just running one parochial run for us. I tried to get him to do 2, but he wouldn't commit to anything definite except for 1.
So, Mr. Fike, you have original budget and revised budget. Am I to understand that the original budget is the budget that the community was made aware of?
Yeah. Now, the revised budget is basically pulling in the ESSER funds. We can only put that in the way this accounting system works is you cannot spend unless you have a budget number in.
But at the end of the day, the revised budget isn't the assumption that we're using another $300,000.
No, that's coming from ESSER funds.
Okay, so based on your revised budget and where you are thinking based on services over the back half of the year, are you under the presumption that we are going to land at budget, be under, be over, and if over, by how much?
My presumption right now is about 300,000 over.
So my next question is, between now and June 30th, how do we cut back on expenditures to save $300,000 a month? Is there areas that we can?
How much toilet paper do we have to get rid of?
No, I'm sorry, but it's
now
at the end of the year.
That's why I just said to you. My plan is to not mow every piece of ground twice a week. I'm gonna mow the sports fields twice a week, so they're to the height they have to have. But the sidelines, or if you want to look at it as a golf course, mow the rough once a week.
So that'll save $300,000.
No, but that'll save probably 30 or 40,000.
Okay.
Steve Biggerstaff is working on things we can cut out. One of the things we already decided is cleaning of the mats on entrances to doors, things like that. We'll just take them out and blow them off or hit them with a hose.
Item D we'll be discussing today may have an impact, I would assume, based on
right
if and when that would sell, if we move forward with that.
Right. The other thing is we're looking at is Steve's looking at every single contract we have and trying to come out with a list, which we hope to have next month. But when we start looking at these things, like just today, you're going to see 3 or 4 boiler service agreements. What's that, about $80,000 between the 4 buildings. We have to maintain and keep them up, but we have to also look at other areas that we're looking at existing contracts and trying to get better pricing from other things, or can we hire a HVAC person on a retainer to take care of some of this stuff?
But again, I mean, so the presumption that we're saying is going to be $300,000 over budget, correct?
I'm thinking about 300 in expenses, but about 400,000 or 500,000 over in revenue. So I don't think we're not going to see a deficit.
All right, so that's what I'm trying to get to. Is
Right.
are
We're
we
not
going to
gonna
see
see
a
it.
deficit? Because
No.
otherwise, that $300,000 has to be carried over into next year's budget. We already know there's going to be utility increase.
Correct.
So I mean, I just want to make sure before we even get into next year's budget discussions
Right.
that we're able to say that we came in even.
We're going to probably come in a little bit under, not on budget, but on cash itself. We're not going to have a deficit, but only because of the extra revenue that wasn't budgeted for. Who expected to be able to get interest earnings again?
Again, though, so when we have these discussions in a couple months and we're trying to get a budget over the line, we can say with confidence as a district that we're not going to have to carry over any budget dollars from 22, 23 into 23, 24.
Well, I should say that because this budget had a built-in $800,000 deficit, which
understood.
Okay,
but
yeah.
but that
but we're not going
right.
to build onto it.
Correct. That's
correct.
That's
You're
what
correct.
I'm asking.
You're correct.
Thank you.
The only caveat I want to add there and just caution you about, and it's like it's being in
Come
charge
on.
of special ed
Knock
that
on wood.
makes me always throw this out there, is just to remind the board that that is the one area where costs can be unpredictable. For example, I could get a child who moves in tomorrow who requires a one-on-one nurse all day long, and we don't have a choice about that expense. So understand the math you're working. Totally correct in general, just reminding the board of that little factor there, that that's the one area where, as hard as Mr. Fike works to try to make those predictions based on his analysis, that's the one area where we can't necessarily make a prediction.
I would imagine that the challenges to tax assessments is also another area that's unpredictable, given that we've had a few settlement agreements in that area.
But surprisingly, we've been lucky. We haven't lost anything this year, even when we had the settlement agreements, because there's new houses that did come on. So, you know, we've been lucky.
Yeah.
I guess my point to
No, I want you to build, not sell it, because that doesn't change our tax base.
and Mrs. Harris, I certainly understand. I mean, our students will always come first, so I get that those are unpredictable. My point is that I feel like every month we're being asked to approve. Maybe it's a software upgrade, something like that. I want to be mindful to say if the software upgrade is going to happen within this budget year, and that's an opportunity for us to save, say, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, where we can still look into it and it can be built into the 23-24 budget, that we're being mindful that we're not borrowing money from the taxpayers that we told them we weren't going to spend. Because we've already had to dip into our fund balance. We've already had to ask for a tax increase during this year. So it's really important to me that at the very least we come in at budget. I understand we're still using fund balances, but you know what we predicted our expenditures was going to be, that our revenues meet that.
No, I totally agree with you. I'm just, you know, working to make sure we come within budget.
Any other discussion on item A? Okay, moving on to item B, accounting and payroll software discussion. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the attached financial information system agreement with CSIU. And Mr. Fike, I know you've mentioned this already to me, but this is a replacement of the existing payroll software.
All right.
First challenges I think that having with the existing software.
The existing software I call adequate, but is very labor intensive, and it really showed its face when we were shorthanded. There's a lot of things that CSIU, which is Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit, they built a software system strictly for schools 15, 20 years ago. They're in over 300 school districts. The most important thing I look at is service. I've been in school districts where a payroll person quit on me and we had no one to do payroll. Got on the phone, they actually jumped on and did our payroll until we had someone. We have no backup. You know, when people leave and we're shorthanded and trying to train, we have no backup. Customer service is sparse with this software system. The difference between this and what we have is about $1,000 cheaper, but it's about, you know, I'm not going to say it's going to save us money because the first year was an $1,800 implementation fee. Where I do see it saving us is in reporting. One of the things we've been working with Pennsylvania's state employee retirement system, we're behind in our reportings, and one of the reasons we're behind in our reportings is because every month we have to do a work report. We upload the work report and comes back with 100 and 120 errors because we have new employees or changes, and like the existing system doesn't give what they call demographic file, which gives all the changes, and then you can upload that to Peasers. CSIU basically creates a demographic file. You upload that to Peasers. It gets put into the system, and then you upload your work report, and then you only have a couple minor errors that you have to correct. When I say errors, you have a new employee, you get 15 different errors because they don't have a birth date at Peasers. They don't have to get a Social Security from the work report, so they don't know who to put it to. You basically have to go in and manually put that employee into the system. So I'm saying it's labor intensive. Things like tax filings. We have a lot more work to do tax filings and complete our 941s. And I know this because I happened to do this, had a brand new staff. No one's gone through W-2s year-end close. Payroll the first week, I'm thinking 15 minutes before the deadlines to get it uploaded, or we could get this done, or I got to be run out of town on a rail because I'm not going to make payroll this week. But we got it done. But we had all hands on deck. Nothing else got done in the office that week. W-2s, it took us 2 weeks to get everything corrected, and we're still working with the state to try to get the files uploaded. But everyone else in the state is having the same problem because the state implemented this new system in Treasury called MyPath, and every time you upload it says that the totals don't equal. And I'm reading in PASVO, but it all comes down to the file format, and the file format on our system doesn't match what the state wants. If I had CSIU, they automatically change the file format to meet the state. Even the Peasers saying that we're using an old file format. If I need that changed through their Skyward system, it costs us extra. So we just have to live with the errors and correct it manually most of the time.
So the proposal that they gave us here lists out essentially 3 modules that we pay for: fund accounting, human resources, and payroll. Is that correct? Would we need all 3 of those?
Yeah, because they talk to each other.
Okay.
What happens is when someone's hired, they go through human resources. Human resources puts all the information in, puts the salaries, approves the salary schedules, and then that gets transferred over to payroll. In this system, we actually have to manually get a paper from HR and then import it into payroll, where the CSIU, they send it to payroll.
So this isn't necessarily...
You're making sure the payroll clerk cannot add anyone. HR has to, so it's separation of duties.
So it's not replacing a system in HR. It's essentially allowing them access into this new portal.
Right, and CSIU is also integrated with Frontline, and they're integrating Frontline and HR as we speak, for absent management and substitutes and tracking.
What does our current system cost us per year?
Thanks.
$37,100 and some dollars.
$37,000. And what is this new system going to cost us?
It's $36
plus an install fee.
Plus an install fee. So I'm not saying it's a savings because the install fees, it's going to cost like $600.
But you said it's going to save $1,000 worth of time.
I think it's going to save a lot more than that.
And if we voted on this in 2 weeks, when would this start?
They could implement for June 30th, actually for July 1st.
So at this time, from my perspective, I am not going to support this. I would be willing to have it built into the 23-24 budget and look at that. But if it's going to cost us more dollars and we get to a position next year where we have to look at cutting dollars, I don't want to be cutting student activities or anything that has to do with students. If we can look at this, you use the word adequate. For me, adequate means that it's working right now and we're able to use it. Certainly willing to revisit it in July, but at this point.
Well, that's what I'm looking for is July 1st start. But I have to get the commitment to be able to.
But if we commit to it now,
the first bill would be due July 1st.
When do we pay for it? So it would still not. We would not pay for it until next budget year.
But we still have to. But if we sign the contract,
Right.
and we're committed to that contract.
Right.
And if we need to look at saving money in the 23-24 budget, this is one of those places. If the administration tells us that a system we have right now is adequate, not it's underserving, it may take a little bit more work, but it's an adequate service, then at this point I think we should continue on with the adequate service and relook at it in the future.
I'm a little confused.
Well, maybe I used the wrong
can-
word. I mean, it does what we need to, but it does not give us a backup.
I'm sorry, I need.
And that's my biggest concern because, you know, I tell my staff every day, you need to learn this because if I die, you're not going to dig me up. If someone quits, hey, I'd probably beat Bob to a saying, but if someone quits,
Yeah, right. Like, please.
you know, it's possible we might not have
Okay.
a payroll. We might not be able to do something, and that's my biggest concern.
Okay, I understand that
Right.
part, and I might not understand this at all, which is
Right.
perfectly fine. But you said that the current system that we use is $37,000 a
For
year.
the same modules. It's actually
Okay,
80-some
and
thousand
you're
because we have student accounting, other things in there.
Okay,
I'm not
and
looking
you're
at-
saying that this is less than that?
It's roughly the same price.
Yeah, right. It's
It's-
like 36 something.
Plus
So-
a $20,000 install, correct?
So,
No,
okay.
1800.
Oh,
1,800.
1,800.
Yeah, there's not a
1,800. So we're
1800.
talking about.
18,000.
No,
Okay, see that's
1800.
okay. See
Yeah.
that's where I was confused. So
Yeah.
what you're saying is that this is approximately the same price.
Correct.
It's just a nicer system that you want to use.
It's a lot easier.
Okay,
and
that's
actually,
fine.
to
I
me,
don't need to know all the ins and outs. I just want to make sure that I have the cost correctly in my head.
I guess that's where I'm not seeing
I
an
mean,
issue
right-
here is because you're
Yeah, I'm not seeing
replacing
an
one
issue
system
either.
with another that's in comparable cost.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
going to do more for you.
Oh,
So
it's
that-
actually going to give us more peace of mind. You know, my payroll
Okay.
person schedules her vacation around payroll week.
And I completely understand that. I just
Yeah,
wanted to
I-
make sure that this is not a huge cost or anything. Like this is not,
Payroll, yeah.
as Mr. Morgan said, this isn't going to be like a
Like I said,
$30,000 additional thing.
Payroll's an important thing, and I think
Yeah.
if this is something, the system that you're saying needs to be switched over to, and we're really not talking about any significant cost increase, I don't see the downside here.
All right.
The only question I would have, which would probably not change my mind, but the data conversion cost they have listed at 3,800 estimated is, do we see us needing to use any data conversion
No, I
service?
ran the numbers. It's by hour and it's only 1800.
Okay, so your 1,800 number, because they have a one-time setup fee per
Not to
application.
exceed. All right.
So that they have that as 1,050,
All right.
and then you're thinking plus 1,800 for data
Right.
conversion.
Because I can pull
Okay.
everything off the system.
Okay.
They
So
don't have to come down here
it'll
and
be
actually
about
physically pull it off.
3,000 then for setup, 2,800 for setup then, roughly.
I think it's going to be more like 1800. I already ran the numbers.
You keep saying that, but I'm not. All right. So 1,800 with setup fee and data conversion all wrapped
Correct.
together. Okay. All right. Yeah, I have no issue with moving forward with this.
And I actually think it's not just in payroll savings, you know, our annual reporting for ACA, they have reports. We basically, our HR
Okay.
department works about 2 weeks on spreadsheets to send over to the,
So does it,
Okay.
this doesn't change our the student?
no, it says, they do have student systems, but I would not even, that's out of my realm.
Okay.
There-
Sorry,
and
since that was on here, I just wanted to question that real quick.
If I understand correctly, there is still an opening in payroll for an employee
Yeah,
to work in payroll.
we do have someone that'll be on the voting meeting finally.
Okay.
But
All right.
we that opening was actually since last June, but the person
Right.
was on
It's
maternity, now
something that's been out
resigned,
there.
so then we could finally fill it. So we've been short-staffed
But that
for a while.
that person that would come in would be able to get trained on this
Right.
new system. They'd be in here in time to get trained on the new system with
Oh, yeah.
everyone else.
And you know, my biggest fear is someone getting sick or not being able to be there and not having a backup.
Sure. Yeah.
No.
Any other discussion on item B?
I have a question for Mr. Morgan. With all that was just said, does that change your opinion or not?
Also, I apologize about hearing 18,000.
Me too. That's why I just
I didn't
wanted
mean to
to
create
double
any
check.
confusion there. That's on me.
I need to write out
Yeah.
things like I said, food service.
Sorry, that's why I wanted to ask.
So listen. I think it's good. At the end of the day, I'm really concerned about how we get a budget over the line this year. I really am, and I think that every day, every time we come to these meetings, we look at things. Again, the word used was adequate. I understand that it's adequate, but it takes more work. It's something that I'm going to have to think about and just ponder a little bit, after just seeing it recently and hearing about it today, because I do think we have to be mindful with every purchase we make between now and next year. This is going to be a hard couple months for us to get through, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions. So that's what I have to say.
Anyone else for item B? Okay, moving on to item C for the fee schedules information. This deals with the custodian hourly overtime rate for building and use requests and paper copying fees. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to add these. 2 months ago, we approved a fee schedule for advertising. We, for the last, I don't know how many years, been charging per copy charge that the state allows for right to know, but we never memorialized it in our own schedule. On building use, we put on the form that they're responsible for custodians. People ask us, well, what's the cost going to be? If it's 4 hours, we give them an estimate, but we can't guarantee it because we don't know what custodian is going to be working that day. So it might be someone at $15.50 and an overtime rate, and add PSERS, the pension, social or FICA, and other benefits. But it might be someone that's been here a long time and making $20 an hour, so that's a totally different rate. So the people really don't know what it's going to be. So I talked to Steve, and we came up with the average overtime rate and added benefits to that, and came out with a figure of $40.90 per hour. So we'd like to put that on a fee schedule or add it to our fee schedule, and that's what would be this year. Next year it'll go up another 50 cents plus 43% for PSERS, pension, and FICA. But we'll also put that on next year's agenda. But I think the board should set those rates each year and then have it out there so the public actually knows,
How many?
what they're going to be charged if they rent a building for 4 hours and we have to bring in a custodian to open and shut it for them.
Mr. Fike, do you have an idea of how many hours that we logged for overtime custodial costs?
Well, this weekend we had 140, and I'd say over half of that was for outside organizations. 140 hours overtime last weekend.
Define outside organizations, please.
Clubs. That want to rent, say, a basketball club that wants to rent Wanton Creek. We have to bring someone in, unlock the building, stay there, make sure they don't run through the building, and then relock it. It cost us overtime to bring someone on Sunday. I think Wanton was both Saturday and Sunday. Jackson Mold has basketball clubs, cheerleading clubs.
Okay, these are extra organizations.
Right.
Okay.
We don't charge them a building rental, but we charge them for bringing in custodians or our fees.
Okay.
So these are all pass-through fees
Right.
then?
These are pass-through fees, the actual costs. We're not tacking on a profit on the custodian's costs. We're taking their overtime rate plus the PSERS, which is this year's 35%. Next year goes down to 34, 7.65 for FICA, Social Security, Medicare match, and small benefits for workers' comp and those things. And like I said, it comes out to, I think it was $40.89, so I rounded to $40.90. So it's not adding anything on for us. If it's an outside organization that's not extra kids, then they also get billed a rental fee for the property. But we don't bill our own clubs.
When we set that up, we did that because they already paid for the building.
Correct.
So
Right.
it's not that we're giving them any good deal, it's just that they already paid for it.
And right now, it's in our policy that they do pay for custodians, but we can't tell them what the custodian cost is because we don't know what custodian is going to take it that day. So we have to wait till the time cards come in, pull the time card, and then send them a bill. And like we had someone request a building for Saturday and Sunday, and they wanted 4 hours each day, so they figured it was going to be the same amount each day. Well, they had two different people, so it was a different amount. They were very upset. And why is it different?
So is this one? I mean, this one will make it all. Like, will this actually make
So someone
more
wants it for
custodians
4
that'll
hours,
say,
they can
"Hey,
take-
I want to come in"? I'm just asking. Like this.
No,
will-
the custodians, they get their fee. This is the average of
okay.
our overtime rate.
Thank
So
you. Sorry, that's what I was a little confused about,
if
Allison. I
someone goes
appreciate
on and
that.
fills out a building use form,
Okay.
they'll also
This
say
is what
4
we're-
hours they'll be there.
Understood.
Then they'll have to pay
Okay.
4 hours at $40.90.
Thank you.
Could I also add just one thing? So the difference too being for an outside group that's not within Exeter would be that we're not charging for the gas, the electric, the lights, and any potential damage, plus the cleanup of after the events. Because you got to remember, even if it's a sports thing, they're still using bathrooms, they're still running water. So that's the difference in the cost from the rental versus what we're charging for the custodial staff.
Yeah, thank you for telling us. So if that's all right, I'd like to memorialize this so we, and then each year, if the rates change, then we'll put it out there.
So is this something we're voting on, even though it's informational?
Both these will go to voting.
Okay.
And then I
Thank
think Dawn and I talked, we'll just add these like we did with the advertising we'll make up an AR form under policy.
Is there anything specific, Mr. Fike, that you wanted to cover in the paper copying fee, or is that just, are we charging anything currently for?
We charge 25 cents for people for right to know because that's what the state says you can charge, but we don't have anything in our policy stating it or an administrative regulation or, I just
Okay.
felt that if we're charging someone, we should have it written down somewhere.
So should this go to Dr. Himberger for a policy update, or?
This would go under an AR under fees.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
not a board, that's an administrative rule.
Okay,
Right. So,
gotcha.
But even ARs, I'd like the board to approve what.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep. So
Anything-
those are the two this month we have.
All right. Anything else on item C? Item D, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the authorization of the administration to proceed with the sale of the Rifton School parcel. Discussion.
I have one quick question. If we go through with this, which I have no real problem doing, but say they want to build something, I don't know, that we don't want there, do we have a say in saying no?
I think the property is zoned residential, so anything past that would have to go through township and planning.
Right.
I don't, Sharon can ask, can we stipulate that it can't be a charter school? No, we can't do that, can we?
No, you
No.
cannot do that.
I don't want to really stipulate anything. I was just wondering if we could or if we can't.
I believe from prior discussions on the land that there is some type of deed restriction or something in place that makes it an extension of the existing Grand Street.
Dunham's a private drive there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So the essentially is two benefits here. There's revenue from the sale of the land, and then the hope would be homes being built, multiple homes, and getting recurring revenue from the increase in tax base.
And I think you talked to the township and they aren't interested, correct?
That's correct. I did reach out, and there was no interest in purchasing this land from the township.
And I think from our other discussion, Sharon said they could do, what would you do, an auction? You'd have to first petition the courts to make sure.
There are multiple ways to carry out a sale. kind of just depends on how you want to handle it. Auctions are simple.
Right.
It's not a high, it's not the greatest parcel, it's my understanding. So an auction might get you the best fair market value.
Any other discussion? All right, moving on to item E. It is recommended the Board of School Directors approve the E-rate PEPM mini bids for the 2023 E-rate funding year to be purchased after June 1st, 2023, that were awarded to the following vendors. We have one for mini bid wireless and then another for a firewall. Although I think on the documentation it mentions it being a switch, so I'm not sure if there's any difference there, but is any, I guess, any discussion?
Is Joe available?
I was just going to say, could Mr. Wade, would you be able to come out and just explain the
Personal.
Thank you.
Yeah. E-rate, by the way, is, I guess they call it a grant program, but it's not a grant program. It's a guaranteed income, but you have to spend it on certain things. Correct, Joe?
Yeah, so E-rate is a telecommunications discount based on the Universal Service Fund, which was established. It's basically a tax that we pay on all of our cell phones and home phones, telecommunication. It'll say Universal Service Fund. It's money that's collected, and then the Schools and Library Division administers a process to distribute that money. It's based on free or reduced lunch eligibility. And so based on that, there's a formula. We get a 50% discount on telecommunications equipment to further our internet services. We participate in E-rate as a consortium with Berks County for our internet connectivity. That's level 2 or category 2 or category 1. Category 2 is what we're talking about here. And yes, Mr. Mel, it was switches. I saw that error.
Because
you noticed it.
I
Yes.
remember earlier this year we already approved a firewall.
We did a
so that was going to be
firewall
my
last year,
first
yeah.
question.
It's
Okay.
just
All right.
Reusing, see the flaw of reusing previous board items. So our switches that are the second item are approaching 11 years old. We typically have a 10-year cycle for those. Their end of life will be in 23, so it is timely that we would get new equipment. The wireless access points are within a 7-year range. I think they're actually 8 years. They also expire in a similar time. So these are just pure replacements. There will be benefits of speed and efficiency and additional bandwidth to them, but they are just replacements for current existing equipment.
Mr. Wade, do you know with the current equipment now, is it still supported by the vendors? Or do we have any warranties or anything like that?
I mean, we have no warranties.
Okay.
There is an end of life process, and they will end support in 2023 for both of these products.
Okay, so they will actually go end of life by 2023.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, E-rate funds can only be used for specific purposes, right?
Very specific, yeah. So
So
category
this is basically
2,
like a pass-through to buy something. It actually doesn't go through our budget. It's
well, so
purchased by E-rate.
money
Internet
is-
and telecom services. I believe.
money is allocated to us, so we have an allotment of money that we have to use within a 6-year period, but it has to be matched 50-50. So we try and schedule our replacement cycle so that we're using it each year, of the 6 years, and not at one point having to replace a bunch of stuff at once. We do try and have a cycle so that we're not hitting too much. But yeah, it's very limited. So the mini bid process, you have to choose switches, wireless access points, firewalls. There's categories, and the bidding process, even though it's PEPM, and PEPM is traditionally a vessel for purchasing. So I could say, as long as I'm purchasing through PEPM or state contract, I can choose my vendor. The PEPM mini bid process is a little different because it is a federal program. So we advertise to all vendors in the state who sell for wireless access points. Every vendor that sells wireless access points gets a copy of our bid, and if they are a vendor of Cisco Meraki, they can bid it, and if they're not, they can bid an alternate, and then we have to go through a process to identify if it's if it's the best fit for our needs. So the switch bid is not indeed the lowest switch bid. The lowest switch bid is a manufacturer that we're compatible with, but we're not currently using. So the interoperability between them is for $1,400, the training and the support we would have to deal with. It's just through the evaluation criteria, we found that we basically measured that the Meraki bid, the second bid, was the one that we were going to go with. So using, of course, all of the parameters for the E-rate process, which is hefty.
So just kind of circling back to Mr. Morgan's concerns with obviously being during our budget season here is I know this says purchased after June 1st, so it sounds like we are going to try to purchase this equipment within this budget year.
Does it say June? It should say July. It is in the 23-24 school year. So the process is we're in the bidding cycle for a July 1 purchase.
Okay, so this would be July 1st next budget year.
Yeah, currently we've currently gone through this process for this fiscal year. So this is the bidding and procurement for next year.
Okay.
And because of the mini bid process, they want it to be ratified so that it can be all of the paperwork and things are in place. When we do make the purchase, it is at the lower PEPM rate. So the vendor will actually give a copy of the proposal to the vendor. They'll be prepared, and then when we invoice, when we do a purchase order, it'll be billed at we will do the billing at the 50% rate. So there's just a lot of paperwork between now and then. So it seems like being 4 or 5 months out is a long way, but it's really not.
So do you have an issue with us changing this for the voting to say July 1st?
Well, it should say switches and it should say July 1st. I will make those recommendations, changes to.
I would be more comfortable with that.
Yeah. So I would say if this moves forward to the voting meeting, we change the language in the recommendation to be July 1st, 2023. Any other discussion? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Way.
Thank you.
And moving on to item F, the chiller boiler maintenance service agreements. It is recommended the Board of School Directors approves the chiller boiler maintenance service agreements with Herman Goldner Company, Inc. for the Exeter High School, Junior High School, Jackson Mold Elementary, and Lorraine Elementary. Any discussion? It's my understanding, Mr. Fike, that this is a agreement renewal that's coming up for these 4 schools?
I'll let Steve talk to that.
This is not involved with Johnson Controls, is that correct?
No.
Okay.
No, they are one of the they are one of the ones who submitted pricing for it, but this was a low quote. So basically, just like Joe is shopping for his next fiscal year, so am I. But the earlier the better we get it in, because then we get guaranteed pricing. The longer we go, and the way contractors are working now nationwide is they will only give you 30 days. They will not give you any further than that. So like maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, we could have got pricing that was guaranteed for 6 months. Right now, we only get it for 30 days. So at a look at this is required by the state. They require that we do independent evaluation of our pressure vessels, our burners, our chillers, and report that stuff back to the state so they can keep that on file. So this is required. We really have no choice.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, Dr. Hearing, that is it for my committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Mel. Personnel, Mrs. Schaefer.
Thank you, Dr. Herring. Let's see here. We have a lot of items on the agenda tonight for discussion. It would be recommended that the Board of School Directors approves and ratifies the following. A, resignations for certificated staff, support staff, and extracurricular staff. Under item B, retirements. Mary Ryder, who is serving 17 years of service, retiring at the end of the school year, and Carolyn Woodford with 32 years of service. So congratulations to them on their retirements. The third item is appointments, and all appointments are contingent upon receipt and district approval of all necessary pre-employment form certifications and state-mandated physical examinations, clearances, etc. Certificated staff A, contracted staff A, support staff A through F.
Dr. Heller, could you explain to us about the contracted staff, Julie Klein, and what her purpose will be here for those 8 days?
Sure. So we have, I think it's pretty obvious that Dr. Flam is not here right now. And so that is a very important position to the school district. And as such, we are very fortunate to have Julie Klein, who was an administrator here previously in the district. And she is going to be coming in for up to 8 days to help plan professional development for the summer, as well as helping with kindergarten orientation and some other pieces of that particular position that are essential that need to get done this year for the role for completion of this year and even the rollout of next year.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item under appointments would be certificated substitutes A through G, and then guest teachers A through B. Under leave of absences, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 employees. And then under item E, job descriptions. So it was recommended the Board of School Directors approves the attached updated job descriptions for Athletic Director and Seasonal Ground Supervisor, Public Relations Director, and K-12 Student Support Coordinator. Any discussion?
I had a couple questions. One on the Athletic Director and Supervisor of Grounds. We've added the word seasonal to a number of places. Can anyone explain what that does by adding that language?
It just realigns to what Mr. Legath is actually doing.
Okay.
That job description was changed when there was a realignment in the facilities department, and that job description was changed. But since recent events, his job description has changed again. Previously, they had him taking care of removal of snow and also the upkeep of equipment. And while Tom knows athletics, he does not know mower and snow. Steven is trying not to laugh back there, but it's okay. It's okay, Steve. You can. We all love Tom, but we know his limitations. And obviously that's an essential part of that position is the maintaining of equipment, and that came about because we do need the fields. We need the fields kept up because kids could get hurt. Because we have them playing sports on there and that could cause an injury. And so we need somebody who knows the athletics part to take care of the grounds so the athletes are kept safe. So I hope that makes sense.
Yep, perfect. The other item I had on the Public Relations Director job description, I was just wondering, could we remove the reference to Parent Square and make that more generic just to say communications platform? I'd hate to have to change the job description every time we change software or something like that. So
thank you. That's a good point.
That was all I had. Thank you.
You took both of mine from me. So
thank you. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. You saved me. I've been on it.
Any other discussions on the updated job descriptions? Okay, so moving on to item F. It's recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the market wage adjustments for administrative positions effective March 3rd. Okay, and final, G, course requests. It is recommended the Board of School Directors approves the attached list of course requests, and there are 7 on those, and all items should be moved to the voting meeting.
Thank you, Julie. Policy Committee, Dr. Hamburger.
Thanks, Dr. Herring. We have 4 policies that we'll be recommending for the voting agenda. Two of them are for first reading and have not been subject to discussion at this point. One of them has to do with our principles for governance and leadership. This is one of our board policies in terms of how board operates, and the other is a policy 237 regarding electronic devices. So I'm going to turn to Dawn, Mrs. Harris, and ask her to maybe just explain, some of the changes that are recommended in these policies.
Thank you, Dr. Hamburger. So I'm actually going to do them in reverse. I'm going to talk about policy 237 first, the electronic devices policy, and just give you some general overview of the revisions there, explain what we did, and then we'll talk a little bit more about policy 11, which is the principles for governance and leadership. So with policy 237, which governs electronic devices, PSBA basically revamped this entire policy. And they're really giving us two options for how we want to propose it. In this case, we put both options on here for you to take a look at, and then we'll garner your input. We'll tell you what the administrative preference is, and then we can make a decision about what we want to move forward as policy. Essentially, this policy can be written in a way that says that electronic devices are, in general, prohibited for use on campus, and then it allows for a few exceptions. The alternate of that is the second half of this policy, where it's written as such that the use of electronic devices is allowable, but there are some very specific instances under which it's allowable, and who gets to decide what's allowable and what's not. The administrative team preference for that, we workshopped this in a whole admin team, so everyone was involved in this conversation. The administrative preference for this is that we take a positive and sort of proactive approach, knowing that electronic devices are a part of daily life. So we would prefer the second half of this policy, which starts with a lot of the italicized language that indicates that we will allow usage of electronic devices on campus, but with some very specific parameters developed by the team. Again, the alternate to that is to take the more traditional approach and prohibit them with some exceptions, but we didn't feel like that was sort of up with the times and what was happening in schools today. We use electronic devices for a lot of legitimate reasons. We prefer to carve out those reasons in an AR and determine what students can and cannot use them for. So that's our recommendation to the board, but opening it up for discussion on that. The other piece that's changed about this policy is there used to be language in this policy related to off-campus activities. That was taken out of this policy. I don't know if you remember, a couple of months back, we redid policy 218, which is the student discipline policy, and all of that language is now codified in that policy. So I'll open it up just for any quick opinions on the two different approaches in terms of that more traditional approach to prohibition in general, or the approach that we're advocating for, which is prohibited use with parameters.
I support that administrative recommendation.
Okay.
Agreed.
I agree as well.
Yeah, I think there was a time where, it was pretty routine that school districts would prohibit electronic devices.
Correct.
And the whole philosophy and approach to that has changed dramatically over the past, let's say, 5 to 10 years since the introduction of cell phones. So I think it's a smart move to kind of incorporate it where you can, allow the principal and the administrative team the discretion to be able to establish some parameters and rules for their buildings and for different grade levels, because it can vary based on grade level as well.
That's key, and that's one of the things that we discussed as an administrative team, that might not look the same across all buildings because there are different developmental needs at each age level. The other thing that I wanted to mention when you're talking about sort of out-of-date language, they removed some of the definitions around electronic devices and made it a broader definition, because obviously we have more types of electronic devices today than we have in the past. They removed language about pagers, and we agreed with that, and we kept that out too in our recommended revision. They removed language about laser pointers because wherever PSBA is housed, they felt that was out of date. We're actually recommending leaving that language in about laser pointers because apparently in discussion with the building administrators, that is still kind of a thing. So we are recommending that that piece at least stay in. Any other discussion around this policy? Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this up again for first reading because I'm going to remove that whole portion about the traditional approach if everybody's okay with doing it that way. Okay. And then
I'm sorry, just to,
oh, sorry.
is if we've done a straw poll, is there any reason that we can't just move to? You're saying that you're going to do this, you're going to redo it?
It's part of the kind of established processes. Anytime you make a substantial change to, first reading or second reading. Of course, we're doing this in committee of the whole, so we haven't
Right,
really
that's what I'm
introduced it as
asking.
first reading. So we could still, if you make changes between now and the board meeting, I think you probably could do that.
I'm just looking to
for
Mrs.
first reading
Montaigne.
of the
for-
next,
I mean,
Are you okay with that?
you certainly can if anybody would have concerns that they want the opportunity to talk through seeing a revised version without the language, with the language that you're not going to use removed, then you could do a second first reading. But if nobody has that concern, you can certainly move it forward and everybody will get a first glimpse before the board meeting.
Okay, that sounds good.
I think I understand what seems pretty clear. I think we should just move it forward. Would be
Okay.
my idea. Save time.
Same.
Yeah, I'm in support of that.
Okay, thank you. And then policy 11. So what you typically see is as an admin team, we workshop a policy, we bring it here to garner input and discussion from the board. But policy 11 is a little bit different in that it governs board principles and board leadership. So this is really truly your policy to sort of sit and discuss and talk about because it represents how you conduct yourself as a whole board. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Dr. Herring to lead a little bit of that discussion. I did just want to give a little technical piece. Some of the language in this policy, there are some recommended updates from PSBA. It's mostly verbiage, so they've enhanced their language, refined how they're explaining things. There's the enhancement of some language around that concept of the team of 10 between the board and the superintendent. There's some addition of language in there about board self-assessment and that occurring on a recurring basis. So I just left all of that in there as it's come from PSBA as their recommended best practice. And then I'll leave it to Dr. Herring to have further discussion.
Thank you. So policy 11 is principles of governance and leadership. Our board last adopted this policy in 2016 and with PSBA updated the document at the end of last year. This allows us as a board to not only update our document, but also to reaffirm our commitment to these 7 principles. We're in the process of doing a board self-assessment, and these guide us, self-assessment, and these principles not only help us with this assessment, but will also guide us through creating our board goals. My hope is that the board will annually reattest to these principles as a reminder of how to be a strong, healthy, productive team. Would anybody else like to make any comments about this policy?
Are the
Okay.
changes highlighted or?
Yeah, that's
It should be in
generally.
bold.
That's in bold.
I have just the section on lead responsibly and the modification of the language that acknowledges the superintendent as a 10th member of the board. I'm not so sure whether I like that language. I mean, before it was, I think we used the reference team of 10. This sort of sends maybe the message that there are 10 board members on our board and that the superintendent is a board member. And that's not true. I understand in theory, the superintendent has obviously a role, should be heard, should speak to every item, on the agenda and should guide us through the process. But, being a 10th member of the board, I think is a little confusing, for those people who might read this and not understand the way it's nuanced.
And incorrect.
Yeah, it is incorrect.
How about if we make it 10th non-voting member?
No, how about just a non-voting? She's our employee, damn it. She is not on the board.
Your current policy that you you just made me laugh.
Every meeting you do it to me.
Okay, your current policy says collaborates with the superintendent as the team of 10. That's how the current one reads.
When was that changed? Because I know there was no mention of a team of 10 several years ago.
2016, June 21, 2016.
See, I left the board and you changed the damn policy.
This policy
this is
didn't exist
PS
before then. This was a brand new policy in 2016.
PSBA is very strong with the team of 10 language.
I have a problem with a lot. You know, this is let's hold hands and sing kumbaya bullshit. You know, and I really, you know, collaborate was okay. Work together with civility and no, work together. And you don't have to tell me that other people have different concepts and ideas. I hope so, because I'd hate for everybody to be like me. So, but this is a lot of kumbaya crap.
I would recommend that we just change it to say, collaborate with the superintendent, acknowledging them as a commissioned officer of the Commonwealth.
I agree.
And we should all hold hands.
That's up for the next count.
Okay. I just thought I'd try to throw that in there.
Are we good with that?
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Is there anything else in there that anybody would like changed? Okay.
I understand. Can somebody tell me what this was beforehand under ethically, the last one? I do accept that when the board has made a decision, we all stand behind that decision, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily believe that we need to like constantly be moving forward. Sometimes you do have to revisit that decision. So I'm not sure. I don't know how that was stated before.
Previous 2016 version, there's a line in there that says abide by the majority decision. So I think that's aiming at the same thing.
Okay. And
I think the way it's trying to read is that, you know, once a decision has been voted on and made, the time for discussion is over then. And it should no longer be debated. I think that's ultimately what that language is trying to say there. But
okay. I like the way you said it better, sorry. But,
I think Robert's rules also says that if you vote in favor of motion, then you have the right to bring up a modification to that motion at any time after that motion has been passed. Is that not correct?
Well, really, that would be a new motion then, not necessarily a modification.
But it may apply to the same thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you can always bring up a topic again, but not necessarily at the same meeting, let's say. But you know, but I think I get the sense that this means that, you know, we try to be positive, and when a board makes a decision, you know, you sort of move on and don't necessarily make that a stumbling block to ongoing healthy exchange and communication.
Kumbaya.
Okay. Is that everything then, Dr. Hamburger?
So I just to make sure I have it correctly, the one revision that we're going to make to this policy then is under lead responsibly, and that's the language around the role of the team of 10 concept, and we're changing it to collaborate with superintendent, acknowledging, I have her, but I'm going to have to change that, acknowledging the superintendent as a commissioned member of the Commonwealth. Okay.
Dr. Herring, that's all for the policy committee report.
Great. Thank you very much. Next would be public comment. No one signed up for that, but if anyone wanted to make a comment, now would be the time. No? Okay. So now we are going to be moving forward, following items for February 21st voting meeting. Start with the meeting minutes. We will be moving forward the bus patrol. Item 4A, 4C, 4D, 4E, 4F, 4G. Item 5B, C, D, E, and F. Item 6A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And item 7, A. Yep. Okay.
Dr. Herring,
Yes.
I'd just like it noted for bus patrol that we'd like to have on the agenda to have Mr. Bernhardt back to report to us on the referrals that he researched, the references, I'm sorry, that he researches from other districts in our community.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you.
At this time, are there any board members that would like to be heard? No? Okay. If nothing else, following this meeting, the board will have an executive session to address personnel matters. Good evening, everyone, and our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 21st for a voting meeting.